Thanks for joining me for this talk, everyone. I'll just introduce myself before I go into our main topic. My name is Stephen Harris, and I currently work actually as a cyber threat analyst at PGI, a Protection Group International, working a lot in digital investigations and on the cyber threat intelligence side. I also, away from PGI, I am one of the instructors or an instructor candidate for SEC 497, which is SANS practical open source intelligence course, which launched at the start of this year. Before doing all that, I spent a long time in law enforcement, where I was a detective who mostly specialized in cybercrime, digital forensics, and open source intelligence prior to leaving to work in the private sector. So that's a bit about me. But here to talk to you today about tips and tricks for digital dumpster diving. The idea of dumpster diving is this idea that it goes way back to the days long before digital investigation, when private investigators used to go through people's bins and pull out sensitive documents. This is all updated for the digital world. So the core skill, if you like, of this talk is to understand how we can exploit data we find on the internet relating to companies or the subjects of our investigation. So we're going to learn how to do a bit of digital dumpster diving, both for the legitimate public documents that companies want us to see, and for the leaked, stolen, left in the wrong place kind of documents that they might not want us to see. So who is this for? Well, this is regardless of what you actually do in the world of open source intelligence, there will be something here for you, because this skill applies across so many different areas. So if you're on the red team, finding sensitive company information and exploiting it is a key part of your reconnaissance. If you're on the blue team, some of these techniques might make your palms a bit sweaty, because you're going to learn about how your company's information can be found out in the wild and what you can do about it. People who do due diligence, so they want to be able to identify sensitive information about a particular business that they might want to acquire, for example. And in the same space, competitor intelligence, what are your competitors working on? Who are they hiring? What are they doing? And so on. And law enforcement, of course, which is my own background, you want to find out everything you possibly can about your subjects, about the businesses, about the gangs, about the corporations that you're investigating. We'll show you how to find documents. And of course, the same skills are widely used by investigative journalists as well. So regardless of where you fit in on the OSINT spectrum, there will be something in this talk for you, most definitely. So here is what we're going to cover in the next half hour or so. We're going to look briefly at first and third party sources of information. I'll touch on those briefly. Then we're going to dive into some specific tools and techniques which will help you become much more successful at doing this kind of work. And regardless of how long you've been doing this for, whether you're just starting out in OSINT or you have been doing this for many, many years, we are going to cover a range of techniques. Some are very beginner friendly, some are a bit more advanced, but there'll be something for everybody. And most importantly, they are all going to be very practical. So after you've enjoyed your weekend off, you'll be able to take these techniques back into work with you on Monday and put them to use. So we look at tools and techniques. Then we will look at how we can find and exploit leaked and stolen documents. And then finally, we're going to look at document metadata and some extra little nuggets of information that we can get out of that. So here we go. Look briefly at first-party data sources, first of all. So these are the kind of documents that companies put out themselves. They put things on their own websites or on their recruitment pages. They're an absolute mine of information. So obviously company websites have their own information. They have to produce reports for investors saying what's going well, what's going not so well, what the risks are to the company, and so on. These are generally very easy to find, and they are intended to be easy to find. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them, but I will mention perhaps a different way of thinking about this problem is I always encourage people when they are researching a company and they want to know what's going on the inside, have a look at the hiring pages of that organization, either on their own website or on sites like Indeed or Glassdoor and so on. Who are they hiring and why are they hiring them? So this screenshot here I took from an advert, a job ad for an engineering role at a bank in the US. And looking at all the skills they required, it said that one of the skills they must have, and there's a lot of skills in there that you would expect to see, they had to be competent at using Internet Explorer and Netscape. So I saw that and immediately thought, well, no one I know of, no one still uses Netscape. And very, very, very few people use Internet Explorer. So what does that potentially tell me about the health of some of the infrastructure on the inside of that organization? It tells me there's probably some legacy infrastructure there that I'm going to have to worry about. But if I am on a red team and I'm wanting to hack this company or I'm conducting a pen test against this company, these little snippets of information about their tech stack can be very, very useful. And hiring pages always tell a story about the inside of a company. One of my favorite hacking stories of the past few years, you can see a screenshot from it here. This was about a hack that happened to Uber. They were hacked by a group of teenagers. And the day after this hack occurred, which was very widespread, but fortunately for Uber, didn't cause a lot of damage beyond reputational damage. You can see the day after, Uber flooded LinkedIn with all these recruitment ads for security professionals. They were obviously spending millions of dollars hiring for all these new roles. And the story behind this, why they suddenly went on this recruitment drive, was because they'd been hacked and they suddenly had to find a load of new security engineers. So as part of your recon of a company, look at who they're hiring, what they're saying in the news, and try to ascertain why that might be. So now we're going to look at third-party data sources, which are, this is not what companies are necessarily posting on their own infrastructure, but all sorts of different resources that, where companies publish useful documentation that we want as researchers. So one of the most well-known is the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission in the US. Companies that are publicly listed in the US must publish every so often information about what's happening inside their business, what the risks are, what the problems are, what their opportunities are, how much money they've made, and so on and so on. If you want to understand how important this document is, I was sat in a seminar probably about 3-4 years ago now with some investigative journalists. And we had a discussion about what was the most important OSINT technique in their opinion. And all the younger journalists who were just starting out, oh, it's geolocation. We want to learn how to geolocate. We want to go and work for Bellingcat. And the more experienced journalists were there, kind of shook their heads, said, no, if there's one skill that you want to learn as an investigative journalist, learn how to understand and read these SEC forms, not just what's in there, but also learning to read between the lines so you can understand what's going on inside an organization. They're an absolute treasure trove of information that are very rewarding if you take the time to go through them. Also, other resources that provide useful company information. Companies House in the UK, Open Corporates is another resource. Look at patent systems. So if you work for a private company here today, you will have competitors in your line of business. So how do you know what your competitors are doing? Well, if they come up with an idea for a new service or a new product, then they have to file a patent to protect that. And you can go on patent sites and look them up. What are they filing? What technology are they developing? What new services are they going to offer? And so on and so on and so on. All the resources I refer to in this talk, by the way, I prepared a GitHub repo, which I will share with you at the end of this talk. So all the links I mentioned will be in there and you'll be able to take these resources away. So don't worry if you don't grab the URLs as I'm talking, they'll be made available for you at the end. Other resources, OCCRP, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. loads of leaked sensitive information about government and private organizations in there. Likewise, Panama Papers, not official information, but leaked or stolen information that's been processed and we're able to search through it. And open sanctions. There are more sanctions in effect, I think, now in the past few years than there have been at any time. It's a big concern for people who work in anti-money laundering or in sanctions. Loads of information about people, their addresses, their business interests, and so on and so on and so on. I'm not going to talk about these resources too much today. Shameless plug, on Tuesday, I will be doing a SANS webcast that will look at anti-money laundering and sanctions investigations in much more detail, and we'll touch on most of these resources here again. So I'm not going to talk about them too much today. Let's dive right into some of the tools and techniques that are going to help you do your dumpster diving back in your day jobs. So let's start with a fairly simple technique, or a well-known technique, and that's the idea, what we're going to call a dork. You might have heard of Google Dorks, but dorks are essentially special terms that we can enter into search engines to fine-tune and manipulate results so we can home in on the data that we are really interested in finding. Two of the most useful dorks that you'll find as you begin to look for documentation and sensitive company information are the site filter and the file type filter. So the site filter just allows you to specify resources from one particular website. So in this example here, I've specified site Hilton.com, Hilton, the hotel company. This is only going to get results from within the Hilton.com domain. And because I don't want just any kind of information, I want documents, I can specify common document formats, which will let me find that. So I can use the file type dork and say, show me results that are PDF files, XLSX, Excel documents, Word documents. And very recently, in fact, only last month, Google also started to index CSV files, so we can use the dorks to retrieve the information like that. So if I put that dork in, you can see a screenshot of the results here. I get about 1,500 results of different PDFs, Office documents, and so on that are found across the Hilton.com domain, which it's kind of interesting, but 1,500 documents it's an awful lot to try and search through manually. So we can add to our original Google Dork and begin to add keywords that might be of interest to us. And the keywords that might be of interest, really, it depends on what our ultimate objective is. But I might, for example, look for keywords like password, confidential, employee, or if I was trying to find people's email addresses, I might put at Hilton.com or at example.com in quote marks, so I can find documents with people's email addresses in them. So in this example here, you see I had about 1,500 results. And then I added a few of these more sensitive keywords like confidential and private. And that narrows down my search term, my search results, sorry. Right, so I now only have 335 results, much smaller pool of results. And you can see now with it from Hilton, I've got all their documents that reference confidential or private. That's going to get me straight on to the interesting stuff that we're talking about. So if you want a really good example of how these Google Dorks can be used to good effect, I will share with you a case that Bellingcat put together a couple of years ago, which was of great embarrassment to some people in the US military, because they discovered that there is a US nuclear bomb storage facility in Europe. And that what they found is that when new soldiers were being posted there, they had to learn about the security procedures for handling the nuclear weapons on that particular base. So this is very sensitive information that you absolutely do not want to be in the public domain. But what they discovered is the new soldiers who were posted there were using flashcard training websites to memorize the details they had to know about the nuclear weapons that were stored there. And they used open Google index sites like chegg.com or cram.com to upload the sensitive information that they were trying to memorize as part of their training. And Bellingcat, to find this, there was no hacking involved, nothing more complex than using a Google Doc like the ones I've just shown you for site chegg.com or cram.com, which are the flashcard sites. And then they just used keywords which were related to nuclear weapons, and they were able to find those results. Very, very effective use of search engine. And it shows if you are creative enough and you have the right kind of keywords, you can find some really quite sensitive information that you wouldn't necessarily be able to find anywhere else. So let's step up the complexity a little bit more. And if any of you have worked in programming, for example, you might have heard the concept DRY, D-R-Y, don't repeat yourself. And that's something that we as open source intelligence practitioners can take to heart as well. All these dorks are very, very effective. And there are some fantastic sites out there where people will intentionally or accidentally leave sensitive information about their business or about their organization that we want to be able to find. So sites like pastebin.com is a well-known site where people will leave stolen or hacked sensitive information. Less well-known, but equally as useful in some ways are presentation sharing sites. So slideshare.net, prezi.com. People will often they will upload their presentations that they do for their company to these sites, go and do a presentation at a client office somewhere or on the internet, and then forget to take it down afterwards. And guess what? All that information that you just presented stays on the internet. It gets indexed, and then nosy people like me are able to find it. Other sites like Trello.com, flashcard sites that I've already mentioned, and also increasingly AWS buckets. These are basically file storage facilities that Amazon provide where organizations can store documents of all kind. They are indexed by search engines, depending on how they're configured, and we can do dorks in order to find sensitive information in them. But let's say every single investigation that I start, I want to run my dorks through all these different websites. That's very time consuming, and it really slows down the collection process. So a little easy win, very, very simple tool that you can build for yourself is to build your own programmable Google search engine where you can just load in the list of domains that you search across time and time and time again. So if you always search SlideShare or Prezi for leaked presentations, or you always search GitHub for mentions of the organization, or you always search Chegg, or you always search Pastebin, and so on, you can actually load these domains into a custom Google search engine. And then when you use that custom search engine, you will only get results that relate to those particular domains. It is a great time saver. I wrote a very in-depth guide on how to do this for the OSINT Curious project last year, and I will share a link with you at the end, which goes through how you can do this but for your own organization in much more detail. But there's a little screenshot here of the one I created, Hilton.com, again, just searching for any mention of that organization, but I only get results this time from these sites. So these sites where people either intentionally, accidentally put information about an organization. And you can see in the first result here, we've already got an email address, we've got some server information, we've got some internal policies that probably shouldn't be out on the internet, and so on and so on. So that programmable search engines, I guess, are a relatively easy way of bringing a little bit of scale and certainly a little bit of speed into your research and avoiding the tedious entering of the same dorks for the same sites over and over again. So it's well worth thinking about the sites that you search across most frequently and building your own programmable search engine to save yourself a lot of time. So still thinking along the lines of speed and automation, I'm going to introduce another tool to you, which some of you may have used before, or some of you may have never heard of it. And that's actually a very, very old tool called wget. Now, wget is a command line tool that runs on Linux or Mac, although you can now install and run it on Windows without any problems. But it runs in the command line. And what wget does is it's essentially, you can point it at any website or even a list of websites, and it will go through all the content of that website and download the content from that website. So let's say I wanted to copy an entire website as part of my research, and to preserve it, I could run wget and it will pull down all the images, all the videos, all the HTML, all the JavaScript, and save it so I have a copy of that on my computer. So because we can be very, very specific with commands we run on wget, we can use it to crawl websites for us and just find those documents, because we can do that by specifying specific file types. So I could write a command with wget and say, hey, wget, go to this website and go down, crawl through all the different levels. So that might mean you go to the start of the website and follow all the links down to the next level in the website, and the next one, and the next one. We can tell it how far we want to go, and it will only pull back PDF files or docx files. And it will do this far more quickly than you could ever hope to by doing it manually. In fact, it's my favorite kind of OSINT tool, because it's one you run, you go and grab a coffee, and you come back and your work is done for you. It will do in a few minutes something that would take you probably several hours if you're doing it manually. But here's one of the challenges with wget. And I know this because every time I mention command line tools, either when I'm doing these sort of talks or when I teach Set 497, if people are not familiar with command line tools, they kind of glaze over a bit, or their palms get a little bit sweaty and think, I can't do this. I don't do Linux. I don't do command line. Well, there are some great resources actually for wget that will help you greatly. And that's a tool called wget wizard. Now, the command syntax for wget is very, very detailed. It can be very, very complex. And to be quite honest, every time I use wget, I still, having used it for several years, have to keep checking out the syntax sometimes because I made a mistake or I forgot to add in an option that should be there. Wget wizard allows you to run a little set of checkboxes, and it will build the command for you. So you can say, hey, I want to crawl this particular website. I only want you to find PDF files. This is the folder I want you to save it to. I want you to ignore the robots.txt file. And I want you to impersonate the Google crawling bot. So I can do that, and then wget wizard will generate the whole command line tool for me. So then I can just copy and paste it into my terminal. And in this example here, the command that I ran looks something like this, but this was all generated by wget wizard for me. And the site I was trying to crawl is a site called bg14.ru. Please don't all go and visit it now. It's a Russian hack and leak operation website. They basically steal sensitive documents from the Ukrainian government and try and dox Ukrainian officials and so on. But they're often, a lot of them are PDFs. So they just put these PDFs on their website. And this command that I generated with wget wizard will go to the site and pull this all down for me. So I ran that in my terminal, and you'll see in the top picture here, it goes through all the levels of the BG14 website. Every file that comes across, it checks, is it a PDF? If it is, it will download it to my computer. If it isn't, it will just leave it there. And this took probably about 5 or 6 minutes for this to happen. It would have taken me hours to do that manually. It would take hours, and I might have missed something. So I run this tool, I go and grab a coffee, and by the time I come back, I've got all the PDFs from the website saved on my computer, so I can begin to use them myself and begin to do my analysis, because I haven't spent hours and hours and hours just doing my collection. We'll come back to these PDFs a little bit later. Okay, so how we're going to look briefly now at leak sites. How do you find sensitive information that is not intended to be out there? So this is not information that companies have put on their website. This is information that has been stolen or been leaked somehow. One of the best places to start trying to find this, I'm not going to talk about the dark web actually, because Telegram is one of the best places these days to go and find this kind of sensitive information. And I think we heard in our first talk already today, some dorks that you can use to find content on Telegram. So we use the site filter and say sites t.me or sites telegram.me, and then our search terms. So it might be the company name, for example. And actually a better resource, which again, I'll provide the link for you, is a custom or a programmable search engine called Telegago, which is a much more refined search engine for searching across Telegram. So if there is, it will search across channels and posts that are publicly accessible. So if you have a particular company that you're interested in, either your own or targets, or a domain or an email address or place name and so on, you can put it into Telegago and it will find what it can from Telegram. It's a good place to start. Last resource that I always recommend for people who want to use Telegram as a point of research is the Deep Dark CTI GitHub. It keeps a constantly updated list of Telegram channels, amongst other things, Telegram channels where data dumps are leaked, where you can go and find them and verify and vet them according to what your needs are. Goes without saying, you need to exercise OPSEC and isolated machines really when you're dealing with some of these channels, in case the files are malicious and so on. But Deep Dark CTI is a great starting place when you want to go to the dark web or you want to go to Telegram to find this kind of information. And again, all the links to these resources I will make available right to you at the end. So I mentioned earlier that Amazon provide these S3 buckets where people can store sensitive information, or where people do store sensitive information. Azure, Microsoft, do the same thing. They don't call them buckets, they call them blobs. But very, very often, organizations will store information in these buckets or blobs, and through mistakes or carelessness, don't configure them correctly and actually end up making the content of these buckets public when it's not intended to be. And guess what? Because it's a public part of the internet, people are able to find it. It gets indexed by search engines. And a resource that appeared a couple of years ago called Grey Hat Warfare. They are a search engine dedicated to indexing all these buckets. So if you have either your target organization or your own, you can go to Grey Hat Warfare and search for things that are of interest to you. You can only get so many results with a free account. To get the most out of this, you need to sign up for one of their paid tiers. But to give you an idea of the sort of thing you can search for, when I was preparing this a couple of weeks ago, I searched for a company name. Won't reveal the company, and you'll see why. A company name and keywords sensitive or private. And in the first 5 matches, I found someone's driving license that had been scanned. I've obviously redacted it. And when I dug into it, this website, this bucket belongs to a vetting company. So every time a company hired somebody, they had to upload their driving lessons, all their identity documents, all their certifications, a university degree, and so on, were all in there as scanned PDFs. And they had been in, because the company had not configured their bucket correctly, it meant that anybody could find this using Grey Hat Warfare. And this is the stuff of dreams if you're on the red team. If you're on the blue team trying to protect the integrity of your organization's information security, this is the stuff of nightmares. So depending on where you sit on the red team or the blue team, if you're in the blue team, incorporate these kind of self-searchers of your own company, your own data systems, search for them on some of these third-party sites and see what's out there. Likewise, if you're on the red team, you should incorporate all these kind of searches and resources into your reconnaissance, because it's going to give you ideas about phishing and who to target, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so our last little section in the sort of last 5 minutes or so, I'm not going to talk about finding documents per se, but I'm going to talk about something slightly different, and that's the idea of document metadata. Normally, if you hear someone talk about metadata, it's usually in the context of people uploading photos to the internet that have GPS tags in or something like that. Well, actually, what we find is that most files that we'll use, that we'll ever come across in our investigations, they all have metadata. And what metadata is simple information about that particular file. But it's not obvious. You can't just look at file and see the metadata. We need specific tools that will get that information for us. But it can contain information about, well, the sort of file that it is, the time zone it was created in, the software that was used to make it, the name of the person, or perhaps their email address, the name of the organization where it's originated from. Metadata can be a very, very rich source of information. And all these documents that we're finding using some of the tools we've looked at, we can sort of build on what we found in the documents and begin to look at the metadata to squeeze out some really useful information. So let's have a little look at how we can do that. So here's an example of the sort of thing we might find. I did a quick dork of the UK government website. I did site.gov.uk and then file type docx, which is going to find me thousands of Microsoft Word documents. So I downloaded one of them and I used a tool called a command line tool called exif tool to pull all the metadata from it. And this is what it found. So it tells me that this particular file was made by Public Health England, the health department. It tells me who made it, a lady called Alexa Gainsbury. And it also tells me that another employee of the organization contributed to it, and their name is Rosalind Eleanor. So think about this offensively. I've now potentially got 2 people in that organization who I might want to phish, and I've got a Word document. So that's a great pretext for replying to them if I want to add something malicious into this Word document, for example. I've also got a creation modified date, so when the file was first created. And the super eagle-eyed amongst you might have spotted, I'll be amazed if anyone has, kudos to you if you did, something interesting about the state of the technology within this organization. We see here that the app version 14 relates to Microsoft Word 2010 edition. But we see the document was created in 2021 when Microsoft Word 2010 was no longer supported by Microsoft, but it was clearly still being used within this organization. If I were about to pen test this organization or try and do something a bit more malicious, it would be interesting to me that they were still using legacy unsupported versions of Microsoft software, because where I find that, I'm also likely to find other insecure, unsupported parts of their IT infrastructure. So it's worth paying attention to these little details. Okay, finally, a very, very useful trick that you may not be aware of, and that is with PDF files. This unfortunately doesn't apply to all types of files, but due to the way that PDF files are constructed, even if someone has scrubbed or deleted the metadata from that file, it's possible to use exif tool to recover that deleted metadata and find information that the person who shared it to the internet had potentially tried to scrub. I'd love to tell you that you can do this with images as well and get those GPS coordinates out. Unfortunately, they just don't work that way. This is a quirk or a feature of PDF documents due to the way that they're made. And I will end in the last minute or so with a quick case study of how you can exploit this. So I mentioned when we were talking about wget, about the Berezini hacking organization, they claim that they steal information from Ukrainian agencies and post it to the web from the Ukrainian government and military and so on. Some Ukrainians, to their part, said, no, this is fake, it's not real, and so on and so on. So let's have a little brief analysis exercise, and we'll look at those PDFs I downloaded earlier. We'll look at the metadata and say, well, who, on the balance of probabilities, what's the most likely? Is this genuine stolen Ukrainian information, or is it fake? What does the metadata tell us? So we download our PDF, which we've already done. I run exiftool against this PDF, which has this very long name, 30317, and so on and so on. And it's been scrubbed pretty well, because this is all the information I have. It tells me it's a PDF, but I already knew that. It's 238 pages long, and the language is Russian. Well, that's not necessarily surprising, but this doesn't really help me answer my question about what's the likely source or origin of this. But because it is a PDF, I can wind back all the changes to the metadata and see how it was originally put together. And I can do that with a single command in exiftool, which is exiftool minus PDF -updates :all. So it will wind back all the changes and then present the file name. It will then create a new file with showing the original metadata. And this is what I found. So we got all the information that we had before. It's Russian language, it's 238 pages long. But now we have an author field. We didn't have that before, it had been scrubbed, but we've been able to recover it. And he said the author is MBC. I had to do a bit of research, well, who or what is MBC? And of course, in Ukraine and in Russia, they don't use the Latin alphabet, they use Cyrillic. And in Cyrillic, MBC translates as MVS. And MVS is the Ukrainian Interior Ministry. So the authoring organization for this document is the Ukrainian Interior Ministry. And we have obviously the information about the software they're using and the creation modified there date as well. So to answer our very, very short exercise, does the deleted metadata tend to suggest it really did come from Ukraine? It was a fake. Well, there's other things we want to check. Metadata tend to suggest that actually it did originate from within a Ukrainian government facility. So that's I'll provide links to tools to how you can do all this. But that is the final part of my presentation. I realize I've gone a couple of minutes over, so my sincere apologies for that. But all the resources that I talked about are in that link at the bottom of the slide there. I will share that in the Summit Slack as well, so you won't miss out on anything. But it's been my pleasure to speak to you today, and I hope to see some of you at another event or a SANS course sometime soon. Thank you very much, everybody.